Hey people, hope you're all well. So big news today. I'll just mention it in passing because it is a big story today. The major earthquake in Southeast Asia seems to be epicentered in Burma. I call it Burma. I know the official name's Myanmar, but um, anti-junta opposition refer to it as Burma, so I will call it Burma. Um, and that's what they've long referred to it as. 144 dead officially, but the true figure's probably in the thousands. And it's also hit Thailand. Um, there were quite dramatic scenes of buildings collapsing in Bangkok and in Yunnan province in China. Earthquakes are somewhat common in that part of China, but they're not that common in Thailand. Um, it's a country that gets tremors, but not quakes on that scale. So it's a major disaster. I think we're going to see, unfortunately, fatalities in the thousands, which will make it the worst earthquake since the Morocco earthquake in 2023. That was itself a pretty bad year for earthquakes. Of course, that year saw the very major Syria earthquake. So that is the main story today, but the other things that are going on is Israel's continued bombardment of Lebanon and Gaza. Um, I, I won't repeat too much what I've said about that, but I've become very critical of Israel. I just don't think there's any moral foundation for what Israel's doing anymore. I think it's went well beyond self-defense. And I would say this, if your moral compass is okay with Palestinian or Lebanese civilians being killed as so-called collateral damage, but you don't hold the same standards when Israeli civilians are killed, i.e., holding them to be more important, then I think it's a very weak argument. Um, but the main thing I want to focus on is, I guess this is crossover here. When I made the video about the arrogance of American exceptionalism, well, I guess it comes into this. JD Vance and Usha Vance were in Greenland in the last 48 hours, and apparently they didn't get the full itinerary that they wanted because of hostile reception. Well, I'm pleased about that. I'm pleased they got hostile reception. Apparently they went to a remote US air base rather than, or naval base, rather than Greenland proper. I'm pleased about that because what we're seeing from the current American administration is absolute bullying. It's might is right. It's this mentality that because America is de facto the most powerful country in the world, it could just push its weight around. Um, I am convinced that far from making America strong, Donald Trump, in the few months, what's been now 3 months of his, not even 3 months, of his second administration, has damaged American credibility so much in just a few months. And JD Vance is just despicable. His speech in Greenland was so condescending and so symbolic of the sheer arrogance of this administration. This isn't verbatim, but it was along these lines. Our friends in Denmark simply haven't done a good job. We have to do this. We have to do this for security. And in Trump's deranged worldview, putting it under American control will create world peace. Well, firstly, world peace is an illusion. That isn't something that any government could deliver. But the sheer condescending attitude towards a NATO country, Denmark, it's just staggering. Now, Greenland's own politics is not unified. There is different parties wanting different things, but they are unified against the idea of being an American colony. Now, you will find different opinions in Greenland, excuse me, regarding its status, regarding sovereignty issues, regarding its relationship with Denmark. But from what I gather, there is no Greenlander, or very, very, very few, who want to be part of the United States of America, especially under this president. And ironically, what may actually happen if Copenhagen plays its cards right, they may actually it may actually strengthen the pro-Danish faction within Greenlandish politics. I don't know, I'm not an expert on that, but if Denmark plays its cards right and doesn't be overbearing towards Greenland, it may actually find that Greenlanders move closer towards Denmark. Greenland's huge, it's the world's biggest island, but there's only 50, 60,000 people there. Strategically, it is important. We shouldn't underestimate that. It's in the Arctic Circle. Geopolitically, it is important. Putin made an interesting comment on it. He didn't really, he didn't criticize Trump. He just said it's a long-term American ambition, almost as a matter of fact thing. It wasn't even a criticism. Um, I don't think people should just dismiss it as a massive big icy island. It does have geopolitical significance, and I do understand the American interest in it. But it's the way this administration's going about it. There was an advisor to the Obama administration was commenting on CNN about this, it might be in the BBC actually, and talking about yes, it's important that America takes an interest in the security of that region, particularly with Russian and Chinese interests there. But there's absolutely no sense in acquiring Greenland. I mean, even for the world's biggest economy, that's resources. It doesn't really make sense in terms of that sort of expenditure taking on that responsibility on top of everything else America has to think about. So the sheer arrogance is just staggering. For JD Vance to come out and say that, um, it's sickening actually, and the two-faced nature of saying our Danish friends. Now you can imagine if, let's say, the Danes went to Puerto Rico, because that would be a broad equivalent. Puerto Rico's got semi-autonomous status. It's self-governing, but the US protectorate. If Denmark went there, it's all for world peace. We're going to acquire Puerto Rico. It's best for the Puerto Rican people. I don't think the Puerto Rican people would thank them for it, but um, the United States of America would blow Danish naval vessels out of the water. It would just be there'd be no sense of well, let's talk about this. Now, obviously, I'm realistic. Denmark can't take on America. Canada can't even take on America on its own. But I do think that this country needs to stop being so on the fence. Starmer's strategy so far has been to be kind of neutral and not aggravate Trump. And today, I think the closest he came was saying that reprisals won't be off the table if there are any tariffs on Britain. So far, there haven't been. But I really, really don't think it's appropriate to go ahead with a state visit at a time when Donald Trump is causing such hostility to friendly countries like Canada and Denmark. In the case of Canada, it's not just another NATO country, it's actually one of the King's realms. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a war between America and Canada, but, lives are being affected by this. People's businesses, trade, it's on both sides of the border. Um, and this idiot in the White House is just, I mean, I don't think Trump is particularly intellectual. I don't think he's particularly clever, actually. I think he's dangerous. And then, you see Trump's acolytes, the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's an absolute disgrace to her office, basically yelling at a Sky News reporter for doing her job. Go back to your own country. The sheer arrogance we're seeing from Washington these days, well, from the Trump administration and these MAGA thugs, it's just, under these circumstances, I don't see why we should roll out the red carpet for Trump. I really don't. And I think Starmer will seriously damage his own credibility if he pushes ahead with this. And he is being quite stubborn. He's saying, I can hear the voices, I'm going to do it. Why? Just in the hope that we won't get tariffs levied against us? I mean, if we know one thing about the Trump administration, it's erratic. There'll be compliments one day and then aggression the next. It's how there is an erratic nature to Trumpism, and I just don't think we should be pandering to that man. I'm not suggesting that we are unrealistic. Again, the UK on its own can't take on America. We can't. But I do think we need to be a bit more vocal in backing um, our European and Canadian allies. I just think that this stance of neutrality is not really realistic in the long term. I'm not suggesting Starmer makes some big, very anti-Trump statement, but at the very least he can speak out in defense of Canada. At the very least he can offer some sort of solidarity without being explicitly, vocal about Trump. But just this idea that we just give a bully what he wants, I don't agree with it. Um, I mean, there's a famous scene in Love Actually. I watched the film recently with Hugh Grant and I think it was Billy Bob Thornton, I think, who played the American president in that, where he makes a famous speech. We may be a small country, but also the country of Shakespeare and David Beckham's right foot, and that famous speech. But there's one little error where Hugh Grant's prime minister talks about Britain as a small country. Actually, we're not. We're not the United States of America, but I don't think we're a small country either. Um, and I do think we could be a bit more vocal than we are being. I still think Keir Starmer is too hesitant. I'm pleased that he reached out to Volodymyr Zelensky. I'm pleased that Zelensky found a very different reception in London than they did in Washington. But I still think Starmer is far too hesitant. But on a broader picture, the new Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, said that Canadian American relations are basically done as they were. They were done. That's a pretty profound statement from a Canadian Prime Minister. I don't blame him. I think it's the only thing he could say, considering the way that Trump talks half seriously about Canada being a state, and Rubio actually goes to Ottawa and actually says, in all seriousness, the president believes this is best. He believes Canada is best served as an American state. I believe Rubio should be kicked out on the spot for saying that. I mean, the current American administration are just acting like playground bullies. And America's always had this reputation as being a bit of a bully, but I think at its best, America can be great. It can be benevolent. I think American people are some of the most generous people in the world. Um, but far from making America strong, these MAGA idiots are just in such a bubble that they cannot see how so much of the world sees them right now. I won't say it's 100%, Trump will be pleasing some people. Um, but without question, America's reputation has definitely went downhill since January. There is absolutely no question in my mind that that's the case. But like I say, these MAGA people are in such a bubble that they cannot see it. They think the jingoism and the bullying actually makes America strong. But it's ordinary Americans who are going to suffer in the long term from trade war reprisals. And yes, one on one Canada versus America isn't balanced. But when you add up Mexico and European countries and it starts adding up, it's going to hurt ordinary Americans without question. If you get the entire European Union, Canada, and Trump's adding countries to the list, America's powerful, but its power isn't unlimited. And I do think there needs to be pushback. And sadly, yes, it's true. Putin and Xi Jinping will be reveling in this. But there's no alternative. We have to push back against American bullying. I also think that, unfortunately, it's become a bit of a wake up call to the so called special relationship. I just think that's far, far more from a British perspective now. There are genuinely deep links between the UK and the US, but I think we need to face the reality. This is much more from a British perspective. Um, I'm realistic. I'm not so dogmatic as to say, oh, I'm not going to use any American product, or I'm going to, it isn't realistic. I wouldn't go to McDonald's anyway. I think it's massively overrated. Still hungry afterwards, so I wouldn't go there anyway. I wouldn't go to Starbucks again. I think it's overrated and it's overpriced. But I use Netflix. Okay. I think if I was so dogmatic to say I'm not going to use any American product, Right now, I'm using an HP computer, so as much as I understand those sentiments, I just don't think it's realistic. I don't think you can be so purist and so dogmatic that you just got off all American influence, and it's impossible actually. But what we can do, if you feel the way I do, you could definitely look more at European influence. I'm not talking about rejoining the EU. I'm just talking about, the fact that America is so dominant doesn't mean we need to be overly reliant on the United States for absolutely everything. And I think the government's approach of let's not offend Trump, let's just tread carefully. It's it's. I think there comes a point where we're going to have to speak out, and I know it's uncomfortable, and I'm sure Keir Starmer wanted Harris to win, but he must have known there was a reasonable chance Trump would get back into power. So at some point, he's going to have to be a bit vocal and say, Mr. President, we disagree on this. I mean, Trump can't fight everyone. He'll kick up a tantrum, but I just don't think that foreign policy should be conducted by pandering. And this is a strategy Starmer seems to be using towards Beijing and Washington right now. Both are bullies. I don't think we should pander to either. And sadly, in the case of Washington, it's a country that we should be having good relations with. And at the exact moment, it's not where Canada is or Mexico is, but what's to say Britain wouldn't be next? I mean, why does Starmer think we're going to get a free pass when Trump's already targeting Ireland, Canada, Mexico? I'm just so disgusted by the way the current American administration is behaving. It's utterly shattered the notion of American moral leadership in the world. I mean, not only is this regime pandering to Putin, um, some of the domestic things that Trump's administration is doing. I don't think that someone who's been in the United States for a decade, even if they technically came in illegal, should be treated the same as a violent cartel member. And the Trump administration's effectively seeing no difference. I think that's a problem. I think that sort of mindset is a problem. Um, I read earlier, ironically, there was a man who voted for Trump and his wife was deported because she wasn't born in the United States. And Trump is going further. He's even now talking about even legal citizens who weren't born in the United States, that is, they acquired American citizenship. He's putting question marks on that now. So people who say, oh no, he's just talking about violent criminals, he's not. He's expanding this well beyond that. Um, so yeah, I think there's a real issue there. I mean, I have absolutely no problem with violent cartel members being deported. Good, you know, American citizens do have a right to be protected from those people, but Trump's going a lot further than that. He is unquestionably in my mind, the worst president in American history. Vance is doing a very good job of making himself the worst vice president in American history. Um, but I think we're at a very significant point in Western history because this is what's happened in 2 months. Now, how much can happen in the next 3 years and 10 months? How much damage can this administration do? I don't know. I don't know what lies around the corner, but I'm convinced that absolutely Trump is weakening American credibility. Far from making America strong, Trump's making America, I don't want to say hated, but it's certainly not loved at the moment. Many Americans feel ashamed and embarrassed. America may be the most powerful country in the world. It sure as hell is not the greatest country in the world right now. The arrogance of American exceptionalism is a delusion at this point. And I think that we need to stop talking about special relationship. I don't say we should cut off all ties with America. That would be unrealistic and it wouldn't be sensible. But we have to stop talking about special relationship so long as Trump is in power. Because whatever political differences we have in this country, I think are relatively small compared to the differences between MAGA cultism and British politics. I mean, even reform is pretty sensible compared to the sort of things MAGA comes out with. Um, and I don't like reform, but it's such a different world. I mean, there was one editorial recently, I forget which publication it was, but very significantly, they wrote, "You can't really judge America by watching a bit of Friends on Netflix, or that isn't America. America at the moment, to a large extent, is MAGA land. It's the sort of things that they're exposed to 24 hours a day from the likes of Tucker Carlson and other shock jocks. I mean, CNN isn't America. It should be, not specifically CNN, but my point is America's a big country, 340 million people. It should be more than what MAGA land is. But for much of the world right now, and I do feel for decent Americans, but the image of America is a red cap wearing ignoramus supporting Trump, and I'm not really interested in niceties or being respectful, because I don't believe in pandering to bullies. I just don't. And when someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene insults one of our reporters for doing her job, the irony, of course, is J.D. Vance had the gall to lecture Europe on free speech. But when that vile woman lectures one of our journalists that way, not that she would be planning a holiday to Britain anyway, but she should be made a persona non grata in this country. We do need to be a little bit tougher and push back a bit, and not carry out relations with Washington on this guise that we need to be, or we need to tread carefully. We better not offend Trump. Maybe Trump needs to be offended, you know, um, because the only language bullies understand is force. And I just think if we send out a message to Trump, Vance, and the others that they could just push their way around, it's misguided. I like that Mark Carney of Canada is taking a strong stance. It's the only thing he can do, but it's important. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I mean, I take no pleasure from any of this. There's a lot of things I like about America, but right now, Trump is unquestionably seriously damaging America's image in the world because it's coming across as deluded, anti-West, bullying, obnoxious, ignorant, um, ironically acting like an old colonial power. That's Trump's America. And you get the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene get really uppity about outsiders asking questions, yet America has no problem stoking up tensions in other parts of the world, supporting Russia, supporting Israel's bombing campaign, killing thousands of people. This is the sort of thing that is going to make America hated. I'll leave it there.